This is the Sattler Files.
A kiss, a long embrace, a fond farewell should be personal. That's why Purslowe Funerals allow you to remember the life of your loved ones in a way that truly reflects their individual character. It's the difference that makes every goodbye unique. For more information about planning a special goodbye, visit purslowefunerals.com.au, because every goodbye is different.
This is the Sattler Files.
Welcome back to the Sattler Files. I'm Tricia Duffield and we're lifting the lid on funerals. We're talking with Daniel McKeig from Purslowe Funeral Homes. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Tricia.
You look so much less like a funeral director than I could possibly imagine. You just look like the happiest man out. And I guess that's part of what we sort of need with funerals is to have someone who actually understands and can talk us through all the things that go on with a funeral, which is a very emotional thing. Are there trends and fashions in funerals as there are in other things?
Look, the whole funeral industry, I guess, has changed over the last 20 or so years. You've seen more of an introduction of funerals becoming a lot more personalised. You have younger people now within the funeral industry, and while I've been in the industry since I was a boy, there's never been that many young funeral directors that have been around the place.
Yes, I didn't know how to say that without sounding like I was either insulting all the other funeral directors or or insulting you. But what an interesting profession to choose to go into at a young age. So before we get into the question I asked you, which is about trends and what you're seeing in terms of choices for funerals, I'm really curious as to what you like about the business that you're in.
Look, I've been in the industry since I was full-time, since I was 16. I took over my father's business when he got sick, and we grew from there, and we went out to the general public, and we then, asked them what they wanted rather than just assuming and, making the decision of whether it just be a church service or a choice of 5 hymns that you had in your briefcase. And we've been able to really start to work in developing the funeral industry into something that is about the person. And it's all about making a difference, I guess, in the community and how you get across to people when it comes to, using obviously empathy, but also the ability of being able to make sure that you can converse with people in a manner that's like you're a friend of the family, I guess.
Yeah. It is one of the most important parts of the life cycle of any person or of any family, isn't it? And I would imagine that if you don't get it right, that's something that could cause regrets for years afterwards with a family, couldn't it?
You've only got one opportunity of doing it. It's not like a wedding nowadays where people might have 2 or 3, or you can, have an anniversary of things. You've got one opportunity to get the funeral service right. So it's very important to be able to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's, and be able to make sure that you provide all the options that are out there now to families so that they can make the decision as to how they want the person's send-off to be.
So when someone comes to you or a family comes to you and says, okay, we have lost a loved one and we want to have a service to remember them by and go through the funeral process, what sort of things do you then come to them with? What sort of questions do you ask them, and what happens then?
Well, I guess before you even get your briefcase out, what you want to be able to do is just get an understanding of who the person was that you're doing the funeral service for. A lot of people are pre-planning nowadays, so they've got the opportunity or had the opportunity to be able to discuss it with family or discuss it with the funeral director prior as to what they want. But the questions that we would go through is, what was the person like? Give us a little bit of an idea about the person's lifestyle, their humour, their family, what they loved in life, what they did as an occupation, what their hobbies were. Because there's no use, I guess, burying somebody, I guess, in a suit when they were out fishing all the time and they never really, they wore the suit at weddings and funerals and that was about it. So, by getting to know somebody, that gives you the opportunity to be able to then make the recommendations that are required.
Some funerals are quite creative now, aren't they? The whole process can be, quite involved and can have quite a lot of creativity. What sort of things are you seeing people either asking for or asking you to do?
You're looking more so at having funerals at different venues rather than churches and chapels. While we have quite a lot of funerals within our chapels, you'll find that people are looking for things like parks or down the beach, or something that is memorable to the person, or looking at larger venues. If a person liked footy, or they were into car racing, we took one of our brand new hearses down the Ravenswood or drag strip and the Kwinana Motorplex drag strips, because that's what the person loved.
Wow.
So we put it on the quarter mile, and that was his last exit. So they're the type of things that you can do to get creative.
That's fantastic. Are there restrictions on where you can go? Like, how do you know that would be possible? And that's just opened up a whole. Like, my brain is just whizzing around now, thinking about the possibilities that people could enjoy, I guess.
Well, you get creative, and then you also, pull in all the favours that you need from left, right and centre, and speak to councils, speak to, the people who run the motorplexes, speak to football ovals, all those type of things, and you negotiate with them, in the right way. And I guess if somebody's got an affiliation with a particular place, then the people around them would know them, so it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, that makes it significant, and there's a sense of ownership for the family, I would think, in the ceremony, and that really does celebrate the life of that person. What about things like green funerals, where people are starting to think a lot more about being environmentally aware? Is that something that is becoming more requested or thought about in the process?
Yeah, look, it's been quite a big thing in the UK for some time now, and it's really starting to take off across most parts of Australia. One of our brands is Green Endings, and it's the first truly environmental funeral company in the country. And I'm not sure what they do elsewhere, but we did a lot of research. So we employed Carbon Neutral to be able to work with us, and we made everything sustainable. So, we worked out the CO2 emissions from the differences between burial and cremation, so that we can carbon offset those. We've, where possible, we've got hybrid vehicles now within our fleet. We found out ways of minimising the refrigeration costs, so that we've reduced our power usage by almost 70%. We use recycled paper for everything. We use, all of those type of things, and the staff have really got behind it too. Because what you find is that the practices that they have at work, they take home, and then they're starting to really get conscious about what they're doing in their own life. So, they're the type of things that we did to research. We then had a couple of the cemeteries with the Metropolitan Cemeteries Board come on board, and you've got green opportunities now at Fremantle Cemetery and at Pinaroo, where you don't have monumental works. You're put into a natural regrowth area, and then the natural vegetation is then growing over the grave. And you've got things like GPS plotters, or really good navigation skills to know exactly where the person is. And you also don't go down deep into the grave, because you're allowing the methane to get out in a quicker way. So all of those type of things, and you have to have an environmental coffin to be able to go in it. We've got some lovely examples of life art coffins where people can design their own coffins, print what they want on the coffin, and they're all environmentally friendly. And we've even got one that's made of wool, so it's like a big Ugg boot, and that gets back into the ground as biodegradable. You don't have any plastics on your shoes. There's no embalming, and those type of things within those particular parts of the cemeteries.
That is fantastic and astounding at the same time. Can we go back over a couple of things? First of all, burial versus cremation, which is environmentally friendlier?
You would think it would be burial, but the research showed us that it's produces 3 times more CO2 than having a cremation.
Really?
And that's because of the methane. The methane turns into twice as much CO2 as it's released back into the environment. And cremation's still the most, environmentally friendly out of everything that we can do here in WA.
Now, the headstone. A lot of people like to have a headstone to not only as a memory, but also to know exactly where their auntie or their grandmother or their parent was buried, or where their ashes were. So without that, you'd have to have some other form of record. And do you see that as becoming either a problem or becoming the technology that we would all, simply have to have? Like, how would that work?
There's a couple of ways that you can do it. I always believe that you should have somewhere that you can go to if you want to be able to, speak to that person, let out some of your grief. But with the fact that in the corner of those green natural burial areas, you can place a plaque. So you're not so much standing right next to the grave, but you're in an area where that person is. And with cremation, you obviously you can put plaques in different parts of the cemetery, under a rose garden, or behind a tree or under a tree. You can take them home. You can do something special with them, environmentally at home. A lot of people now are choosing things like spreading ashes in the river or the ocean, and we've got environmental pods that break down, that you can put the ashes in, and they slowly drift off and start to break down and spread the ashes over an area, which the pod then breaks down very, very quickly, and it's still environmental again. But now with the technology of things like phones and GPS and memorials, we've got a great website called Have an Address. It's a little bit like Facebook for the dead, and you can get on and you can memorialise and make comments, and everybody can share stories and photos and those type of things of the person who's passed away. So there's also in the fact that you can GPS plot in where the grave is, and you can have it so that people have a scanner, and you scan a QR code and it gives you a little bit of a life story of the person. There's lots and lots of different things now that you can do, and it still keeps that environmental path. And if you think of things like funeral notices and death notices have predominantly been in the newspaper, by having a website like Have an Address, you're not having to be able to print paper or cut down trees, do all those type of things. You can actually go online and help build a memorial page for the person that's passed away.
That's amazing, isn't it? And of course, as newspapers dwindle, it makes sense, doesn't it, that we'd have to have another avenue where people can express, their thoughts and so on. That's amazing. Tell me about this growing over, the areas where vegetation is then allowed to grow over. Tell us how that works and how we know where that is, and that we can be guaranteed that won't change. How does that part of it all work?
They're designated parts of the cemetery. And
right.
All the cemeteries, for instance, in Western Australia are government owned. And if you've got a tenure on those particular graves too. So when you first purchase a grave, you purchase it for 25 years, and the cemetery has to give you the option of 50 years. So you know that at least over the next 50 years they can't change that portion of the cemetery and make it into a monumental area, for instance, or a lawn area, and you can be guaranteed that during that period you've got natural vegetation for the local area that's been regrown over the top and allowed to seed.
What about for people who might be buried, say, in church grounds or in areas that aren't so cremated and then their ashes put there? What if those buildings are then extended or sold or whatever? Are there protections for people who or families who might have chosen that for a loved one?
No, not if it's outside the cemetery grounds.
Right.
So, churches will quite often do memorial walls, but what you'll find is that if they do decide to be able to build over that particular area, they'll move the ashes to somewhere else.
Right. Within
the church still. It's all still very respectful. The thing is, if you're burying, ashes in your backyard and you put a tree over it, then it makes it a little bit more difficult if you want the house to be able to retrieve them. But you need to be able to think of these type of things, obviously, as you go through.
I think the whole green funeral thing is really, it's revolutionary in terms of where the industry has been and where it's going. I just find that astounding. I find all those initiatives, my head is spinning. I just honestly had never thought that any of that would be possible. Are people requesting that? Is that something that's already got consumer demand?
Yeah, it's already starting to build traction. It's a slow process because you need to be able to get out and advertise to people that these things are available and that they can, I guess, choose these type of options when they are pre-planning their own funeral or choosing the funeral they have for somebody who's passed. So that's part of that initial discussion we're talking about when it comes to finding out what a person's like. If you find out that they're a bit of a greenie, well then you look at the options that are available for them.
I think that's amazing. And you make it seem like the most natural dinner conversation possible is, you know what, let's have a talk about who's doing what and how we're going to go. And I guess it's important that you have that discussion, isn't it? Because we're all going to face it eventually, so we might as well do it how we want to have it done.
Very true. And that's why we're so big on looking at pre-planning people's funerals for them. There's no cost for us to be able to come out and sit down and work through what you're wanting. And you've got the options, obviously, then of being able to prepay your funeral, and which is probably the most financial decision that you can make in your life, because the way that cemetery fees go up and all of those type of things, you find that it's over the general inflation rate. So once you've prepaid a funeral, it's capped in for life, and that could be 20, 30, 40 years down the track.
You're getting young, bargain.
You're getting young, you get that bargain, and you're not having to worry about it at all, I say.
Absolutely. All right, now if somebody wants to find out more about green funerals in particular and Heaven's Address, is that, how can they go about that?
It's probably easier to go to the websites. So we've got purslowefunerals.com.au, greenendings.com.au. And those two sites will lead you, into pre-planning and placement things, so that you can really start to be able to, get a grasp on things. So the other option too is to be able to just drop into any of our offices, and we're happy to be able to have that chat or come out and see you, give you a free personal information guide where you can start to write down the type of things that you're wanting and put it on paper. And that prompts you with the questions that you need. So, there's many varied ways, but easy just to pick up the phone, go to the websites, have a bit of a look and see what's available.
Well, Daniel McKeig from Purslowe Funeral Homes, thank you for lifting the biodegradable lid on funerals, and in particular green funerals. Absolutely fascinating. Can't wait to have a chat to you again and see how many people have decided to take up that option.
My pleasure, Tricia.
Thanks, Daniel. You're listening to The Sattler Files.
This is The Sattler Files.
A kiss, a long embrace, a fond farewell should be personal. That's why Purslowe Funerals allow you to remember the life of your loved ones in a way that truly reflects their individual character. It's the difference that makes every goodbye unique. For more information about planning a special goodbye, visit purslowefunerals.com.au, because every goodbye